Here we go again. Another week, another IEM release. This time, it's a product from a company whose stuff I have seen many times, but rarely used. This is the Simgot EM6L. It costs $110. Let's see what it has to offer. Simgot says that this new IEM is designed to provide, quote, mesmerizing mid and low frequencies. They promise a harmonious blending of tones, which sounds like a pleasant goal. The company says their tuning follows the 2019 Harman target curve. Simgot says this tuning will allow us to hear, quote, the richness of low ambiance, the depth of steady mids, and the captivating allure of the highs. Throughout the marketing material, the company says that the tuning is for a balanced signature, not neutral, not bassy. Another aspect the company is pushing is this IEM's gaming ability. They claim that the EM6L has, quote, accurate soundstage and imaging, which would be perfect for gaming. Simgot provides a frequency response graph. It shows an emphasis in the 3 to 5 kHz region. That might be problematic for anyone who hates sibilants. As for design, the EM6L is a typical-looking, typical-sized IEM. It has a rounded design with inoffensive painting. It is fairly light, lighter than the Moondrop Aria and Starfield. The EM6L is made mostly of plastic, but it feels robust. This IEM comes with a standard protective case, a handful of silicone ear tips, and a dual-pin cable. This cable is braided in shrunken plastic. Unfortunately, the cable transmits noticeable microphonics when rubbed against surfaces. The fit and comfort is perfectly fine for me. Once I found properly fitting ear tips, the EM6L stayed in my ear cavity without difficulty. I could wear it for about 2 to 3 hours at a time. Overall, Simgot promises an IEM tuned for Harman target fans. It has a reasonable design and fairly comfortable fit. There's nothing flashy about this product, and frankly, there doesn't need to be. Simgot says several times in their marketing that this IEM has a balanced signature. To test this, I listened to my EM6L for several weeks as one of my go-to IEMs. I paired them with my FIO BTR7, Low 2PA S1, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, Eco Zerta ITM03, and straight into the headphone sockets of those few devices that still have them. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD, streamed lossy content on Spotify and YouTube, and consumed a wide assortment of other digital media, including TV shows and movies, while using the EM6L. My impression of the bass is that it's a mixture of sub-bass roll-off and marginal mid-bass emphasis. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, a track that has low rumble from the start, the EM6L did recreate that detail, but its transience was faster than what I heard on the more neutral Moondrop Quarks or even the Aria. The sub-bass rumble was less audible on the EM6L than these two other IEMs. Mid-bass was slightly elevated on the EM6L, not too dissimilar from the Aria. When the crescendo arrived at the middle of the track, the EM6L was able to keep the various group sets reasonably clear, somewhat clearer than both the Quarks and the Aria. I would say that separation between sub-bass and mid-bass on the EM6L is better and more audible than on the Quarks, Aria, or Starfield. In Conquer and Irodori, the EM6L rendered hard and sharp drum strikes. These were more piercing than what I heard on both the Quarks and the Aria. Each drum strike hit was clear and precise on the EM6L, while the Quarks in the Aria and the Starfield tended to blend those strikes a little bit, resulting in slightly longer reverberation and decay. The mids on the EM6L are forward. Vocals, particularly female artists, are sibilant and retain a grainy signature. In Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland, the EM6L clearly emphasized the recorded sibilance and vocal grain. This was similar to what I heard on the Aria and Starfield. The Quarks were more neutral in this regard and did not push the sibilance. Mid-centric instruments never shrouded the vocals and drums never overshadowed the singer on the EM6L. In Want You Back by Haim, the EM6L again showed that it does emphasize sibilance. This was an elevation of perhaps 3 to 4 decibels. The multiple vocalists in this track were clear from the moment they entered the mix and remained distinct even when all the instruments played at maximum. All the vocalists were ahead of the other elements and were easy to hear. The treble sounds mostly neutral, with a marginal emphasis in the mid to upper treble. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the EM6L allowed the brass and horns to pierce through the group sets. They were louder than what I heard on the Quarks and slightly more clear than what I heard on the Aria and Starfield. The higher pitched notes seemed a little sharper on the EM6L than these other INs I compared to. In Flight from the City, the EM6L presented the electric buzzing effect from the beginning of the track, but this detail was slightly recessed and not as obvious as on the Tin Hi-Fi T2 or the WG T2. It was, however, better and more obvious than on the Quarks or the Aria or Starfield. The cello and piano notes were mostly distinct with minimal overlap. This was different than on the Quarks, Aria, and Starfield, which tended to overlap the notes of these two primary instruments in this track. In Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, the EM6L presented the various instruments in the proper positions: left, right, center. The saxophone was the loudest in the mix, followed by the cymbals. There was slight melding of all the instruments, but overall clarity was greater than what I heard on the Aria, Starfield, and Quarks. However, the Tin Hi-Fi T2 and the WG T2 presented more clarity in this respect. As for detail retrieval, the EM6L has slightly above average presentation. Obvious details are always there. Subtle details can be heard if you pay close attention, but nuanced, delicate details may not be apparent, especially if there's a lot of stuff going on in the track. For a more quantitative test, I listened to Kazuki's song New Light. I count the number of footsteps I can hear in the first 60 seconds. This footstep test is very important and crucial for you to conduct at home by yourself if you really want a more subjective yet still slightly objective way of figuring out whether your gear really is detail-oriented. And, by the way, the footsteps that I'm referring to are the type that are heard exactly at 11 seconds into the track. That is the sound I want you to listen for. The EM6L rendered 8 clear footsteps in this test. Compared to the Moondrop Blessing 3, which provided 16 footsteps, the WG-T2, which presents 10, the Tin Hi-Fi T2, which renders 8, the MS2 with 9, and the Starfield and Aria, which presents 6 to 7, and finally the BL03, which renders a measly 5 to 6. As for soundstage, I would say that the EM6L is above average. It is wider than the Quarks, Aria, and Starfield, but the Tin Hi-Fi T2 and the WG T2 have wider soundstage. My overall impression is that the EM6L is a balanced sounding IEM. The bass is slightly elevated in the mid-bass, mids are clear though somewhat sibilant, and treble is mostly neutral with a marginal emphasis in the mid to upper treble region. We have lots of IEM options, more than there is time to count. Companies unleash IEMs every month and it's impossible to keep track. My bottom line is that there's no reason to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on these products. They are not reinventing the wheel. In fact, there are so many options within the $100 or below category that you are bound to find something that fits your style. The Simgot EM6L, I think, is a fine IEM. If you enjoy the Harman Target signature, then you might enjoy this iteration of it. Compared to the Aria and Starfield, which also were tuned towards the Harman Target, the EM6L is clearer, not as bassy, and has wider soundstage. But if you dislike sibilants or you just are not a fan of the Harman Target, that I can understand, then the EM6L will probably not make you a happy camper. You can EQ that trouble spot for the sibilants if you're so inclined, but you may not want to go through the hassle. I don't think there's anything particularly outstanding about the EM6L, and I don't think that there's any issues that would preclude this IEM from being a good contender. It's a decent product at a decent price. I would not recommend it if it was priced higher, but at $110, I think it does offer enough to keep interest.